You have questions, we have answers. This is Jane Muller.
And this is Ken Muller. Welcome to our show, all about real estate with Ken and Jane. Good morning and welcome to today's program. We are joined today by a very special guest, Middlesex County Clerk, the Honorable Miss Nancy Pinkin. Ms. Pinkin was sworn in as a Middlesex County Clerk back on January 1st, 2021. And prior to that, she served 4 terms in the New Jersey State Assembly representing District 18. She is the recipient of many, many awards, too many to name, recognizing her for significant contributions to health causes, women's leadership, and legislative initiatives. Today, we're going to discuss a very interesting topic and of growing concern in New Jersey, and that is of deed fraud. Nancy, big welcome to our show.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you, Jane.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. You know, one thing I say in county government is that if each person volunteered for 2 things, we would have a great community. And the 2 of you are involved in so many things. So I thank you for that. And I thank you for inviting me today. And today I have Heidi Pech here with me. She is the Supervising Data Control Clerk in Middlesex County. She does a training of a lot of our staff. We have very experienced staff, and they've been doing it for very many years on deeds and mortgages and all the things that happen in our office. So Heidi has been with us about 10 years, and she specializes in electronic recordings and educating, as I said, our clients and our employees. Her career in public service began after surviving the 9/11 attacks in the World Trade Center. And she has 2 decades of experience. She's had several IT positions with the Depository Trust Clearing Corporation, and she was able to use her skills to contribute to technological advances within the Office of the Clerk. So as a proud employee and resident of Middlesex County, Heidi is always grateful for the opportunities to serve her county, and we're grateful to have her working with us.
Fantastic.
Great. It's welcome you too, Heidi, and thank you for the introduction. Thank you. That's great. So to get started with, I guess for the benefit of our listeners, we should discuss what exactly are we talking about when we say deed fraud? What is it?
So property fraud is when people file fraudulent documents in an attempt to claim ownership on a property without the actual owner's knowledge or consent of a property transaction. So fraudulent deeds can be created through forgery, coercion, impersonation, or misrepresentation. And these schemes often target financially vulnerable homeowners, older adults. They might be targeting vacant properties or properties that have no mortgages. Now, the incidences of property fraud have been rising, and although there are no national statistics tracking home title theft, the FBI's 2023 Internet Crime Report was tracking 9,521 complaints of cyber-related real estate and rental fraud last year, with losses that were totaling more than $145 million. And in addition to that, we're now layering on AI and the ability to do fraud, whether it's property fraud or other types of fraud, as AI starts to come into our lives. It could be a benefit, but it also can be a detriment to things that happen. So since the county was founded, the Office of the County Clerk has maintained land records to establish and maintain documentation of who owns the land. So the whole purpose of our registry division and recording property is to, it's a country that when we started, it was basically open land, and over time, more and more of it's been acquired. And our job is to record that transaction and to make a record of what is actually happening. So we've been doing it back since the 1600s. Obviously, New Jersey is one of our oldest states, and Middlesex County was the center of the state. So really, we are the repository of many, many records, and many of them historic. So the things that are recorded are deeds, mortgages, assignments, liens, satisfaction of mortgages and liens, and the records are considered permanent. Our job is to preserve them in perpetuity, and the land records are in fact owned by the public. We as the custodians provide the protection of the records and the public notice of what's happening. So we record them, we maintain them, and we display them, and the public has the right to come in and search them, to view them, and copy them in our office. Some of what we do is electronic now, and some of it is hard copy, but there's always a basic record. I don't know, Heidi, if you want to add anything to that.
That was perfect, what you said.
So I guess just to backtrack, so the AI and Google are great tools. They provide a lot of benefits to the general public. But I think what you were also saying is that having the internet access gives people can look up other people's identities, where they live, and they can pick on the vulnerable prey. So the computer opens up a whole network for the fraudsters out there to possibly find those properties that are vulnerable, that are vacant, that are land that's not been developed, and that's one of the negative factors of the.
That's true, but it can happen in hard copy as well. So just to backtrack how we got to this point of talking about this issue, we have incidences where issues come up, and let me see if I can just give a few examples of what happens, what kind of fraud we're talking about. We have family property fraud. The relative dies, and then one of the siblings, which are probably adults, want to get to that property before the other siblings. Sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's a false filing on a vacant property. It could be seller impersonation. It could be sovereign citizen, and that's a little more complicated. We could talk about that. Could be a case of a company that's acquiring long-term rights to sell a property. And it could be vacant property theft, obituaries and deaths, where people see they are monitoring the obituaries, and they will find that property of the person who died, and they'll go and try to record it before anybody. Because usually once somebody dies, you have a period that people are grieving, they're taking care of all of the things that go with that, and they're not focused on changing hands with the property right at that time of the death, but somebody else is, and they could go in and try to record that in their own name. It could be senior abuse fraud, where a family member says to the senior member, or someone, could be a non-family member, I want you to sign the deed to this, and they don't know what they're signing, and they just say, we have to do this or I'm not going to take care of you. And it could be that. It could be fraudulent checks to pay off a mortgage. That could be recorded. It could be conveying the deed to yourself and then changing the value of the property. It could be individuals might receive a call. There was a case where a call came in and they said, well, we have, you have to show up tomorrow with your ID and a check for $10,000, or we're going to, do something with your home mortgage type of thing. So people are they're very ingenious. There's lots of different variations that could happen. But so we were having this discussion about property in Piscataway, where there were some vacant properties where there was fraud. And Heidi kept saying to me, Nancy, I wish there was more we could do. What could we do to prevent this from happening? So the more we started thinking about it, we had already been struggling with how to deal with this. So then we said, well, let's meet with the prosecutors. We're going to meet with the Middlesex County prosecutors, and we're going to say to them, what's more we can do? When we have a case, we refer to the police or the prosecutors. And so we started meeting with them and saying, let's try to put protocols in place. And then the next thing we said was, well, we really need to train the experts in the field. So the attorneys, the realtors, the banks, we didn't include the banks. Banks is next on our list. Include the banks, include the police, so that we are training together and we can red flag things before they happen. So if a realtor sees a property come in, and usually people have their sixth sense, something doesn't seem right, something looks fishy, and then we want them to right away. Even in our office, people will come in and they'll insist, like any fraud, they'll say, you have to do something right away. They want you to do it right away before anybody figures out what they're doing. And they'll insist to our staff that, they have to do something. And the staff, being nice people that they aren't expecting that. And so we try to train them this is your red flag. Once somebody's trying to do something that seems out of the ordinary, they'll tell you any story they want to get you to take that action. Now, one important thing with the office of the clerk, with the recorder, is that our job is to record an action happening, but that doesn't make it legal. So let's say a relative says, well, my mother died, I was living with her, and the property is supposed to be, she said it was going to me. And even if we were to record it, that doesn't make it legal. So you still have the issue of title insurance. Years ago, people didn't necessarily, not everybody takes title insurance. I think it's optional. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, unless you have a mortgage, then they require it. But,
right.
But otherwise, it is optional, but it's a good idea.
But it wasn't really, fraud wasn't happening that much, so it really wasn't called into play. So I think over time, and correct me again if I'm wrong, that people started to take it less. And now, all of a sudden, title companies have all these claims, and so now they're dealing with having to take it more. And so anyway, so we just said we're going to work more to try to train everybody. So we did the program that you joined us with at the Middlesex County Bar Association, and we want to keep training people in the field and the public. We also do programs with the prosecutor's office whenever we can, where we're training the public. And while some people think it's just seniors, it's not just seniors. And Heidi is like on the ground, and also it's the people that are e-filing, the companies. There are a lot of companies that file things with us. They'll spot things, and a lot of times Heidi will say, this isn't right. She'll go back to them and say, you have to check with the agent, you have to check with the attorney, something's not right here. Heidi, do you want to interject in that?
So I'd like to say a little something about Nancy, because she said there's got to be something more that we can do. And I just want to say that it's truly an honor to work for someone like her, and that she genuinely cares and listens to people. And it's not just part of her job, it's who she is. And I think that's rare and inspiring. So I'm really fortunate to work for someone like Nancy. And to go from where Nancy left off, it is true. There's so many different avenues now to perpetrate fraud. And even though there's metadata with electronic submitters and it's supposed to be harder to commit fraud, it also makes some of those perpetrators, it gives them a little anonymity where you don't really know who. It's like it's another layer. And one thing I have to say about all of the recorders at Middlesex County, and I've heard this about like other counties, like people are like, well, other counties just record these type of deeds. We don't just look at them for like recording statute. We look a little more into it. Like in the case where somebody dies, and the person that was on title with that person, it's like we look at the vesting. So if it wasn't joint tenants with rights of survivorship, and let's say it was a parent-child, somebody actually came in, they tried to record the deed, the father died, and they said, I was on title with my father died. They brought a deed in, a quitclaim deed, to prepare to transfer 100% ownership over to them. But when you looked at the prior vesting, they weren't joint tenants with rights of survivorship, they were tenants in common, which means that they both had 50% ownership, and then the man who passed had other children who were heirs to his estate, and we refused to record the deed.
Because tenants in common, when one of them dies, the rights go to based on his or her ownership. Right.
And sometimes it does go to the assessor, and sometimes it takes years, the other heirs to come forward and say, to look into the father's. Sometimes it takes years to undo that type of thing. So we try to be really vigilant.
That's a great point. We're going to continue this. We're just going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages. Okay, welcome back to our show. So let's continue our topic on this deed fraud. And I have a question with the notary, because as I understand it, the deeds, I don't know if you guys now accept electronic type notaries. I know that's evolving.
Yes.
That's an evolving thing, but it used to be with the traditional deed, you would have to be the grantor would have to sign it in the presence of two witnesses, and then his or her signature of the grantor would have to be witnessed by the notary public. So, and I guess with the third party fraud that's going out there, that probably they're falsifying. They're probably presenting a document similar to that has the wedding signature, the notary, the stamp, the seal, but it could be a falsified notary public, or the whole process is illegitimate. Is that something you guys have seen in the recording desk?
So prior to COVID, New Jersey didn't accept remote online notarization. And during COVID, there was a temporary order. I can't remember the number of the bill, the legislation. Now it's permanent. So part of the notary fraud, most of what we've seen is where people actually lift the entire notary, the wet ink stamp, and it's fraudulent, where it's not related to remote online notarization. They're actually either using the notary commission stamp and like copying the signature and presenting that on a wedding document.
I see. So just falsifying the signature, providing a real signature, a real wedding signature, but it's not that mimics the notary signature, but it's not the real, and they somehow mimic the stamp.
It's not the real notary. It's not the real seller.
Not the real seller.
They steal the notary seal from somebody. They could happen that way. As I said, people are ingenious. There are lots of ways.
So that's why at the Middlesex County Bar there was talk brought up about going through another process, possibly of verifying or having a checks and balances, where maybe with every notary, like if Jane Smith is a notary, asking her to verify that every document that's presented to the county clerk has in fact been truly notarized by her. That's again more administrative labor, and maybe it should be the attorneys or the title company should do it before it gets.
Well, that's a good idea. We could ask them. You yourselves could just implement that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
creating that policy. Again, that's the point of training the attorneys and the realtors. Excuse me, the realtors and the bankers on what's happening with fraud, so that they can catch it. You could check it. We could check it. I mean, if we're both checking it, it's not going to be a bad thing. It's going to be a good thing.
Good thing, sure.
So
everybody has to. It's a team effort. So between the realtors who are on the ground and the title company and the attorney, somebody should catch it before it gets to the recording office, and then you guys are like the last set of eyes and ears and.
We've done that. When we had a document that looked suspect, we've contacted the notary to ask them if it was in their log, if they in fact have done it. But it would be excellent if that could be done before it's presented for recording. That would be excellent.
The sooner we catch an issue, regardless of who's catching it, the better off it is. The greater probability we'll have in saving the person doing the transaction, whether it's a business or an individual, from having to go through the legal expense of unwinding a fraudulently recorded document. So the sooner we catch it, the better.
Yeah, and it's a real occurrence. I mean, we know from being in the industry, we know colleagues and other companies that actually there was one case where two real estate agents went to the closing table, and only at the closing table did they find out that the conveyance was a fraud, and then the perpetrators just raced left the closing office and fled. That's how real it was. This is so within the last year. There was a story circulating among the realtors.
Oh wow!
I know. I said this could be a TV show in itself.
Yeah, American Greed or something. It'll make its way, or 2020. Somebody's gonna. So it's a real thing, and it's but it's there should be a lot of checks and balances along the way, and then and then especially with the realtors, we're the ground front. So if you don't have any contact, like you said, the ground, the signals are. The person is evasive. I've heard that they said they have COVID. They prefer to text. There's no phone communication. There's no in-person meeting. Those are all things. So now what the realtors are talking about doing is implementing a thing that, hey, any client you have, I want to see a photo, driver's license, ID. We're not just going to have this long distance discussion via phone and text. I want to show me your driver's license. That's something that almost is becoming a mandate now.
I think we're going to start that with people coming into our office. They're going to have to show. They do show their ID. We have sheriffs in the office, so they have to come through the screening to get into the county building, which is it's a statutory requirement to be at the county seat. So when they come in, they have to show ID to come in. They have appointments. Usually, they're not allowed to come up unless they're pre-screened. We can have online appointments so that we know people are coming. We do have, when we talk about sovereign nation, if you want to veer into that for a second. So sovereign nation are people who come in and they don't believe in the rules of the country. So they will come in and they'll try to record a document that they have no really relationship to, and they will have documents that are in gibberish, and they would come up to the office and they would often be very combative when they're there, and then we have to call the sheriffs and all that. So we implemented a policy with that. And by the way, when these things happen, all of the county clerks across the state are meeting together. We share these ideas and we figure out how best, and we try to apply it across every county. So when they come in now, we started a policy where we have to look at the documents of people in the front lobby with the sheriff's right there. And then if something doesn't seem right, what we'll do is we'll say, we'll give the person a choice. You can give us your document. We'll have our attorneys review it, or we'll make a copy. They can take their real documents back and we'll give it to our attorney. And then the attorney will decide if it seems legitimate or not. And then we will proceed from there. And that's been a really great step to get to things before they go any further. Now, when there's a transaction, whether it's a business transaction or a residential transaction, let's say something ends up being problematic for some reason. So the buyer and the seller could both be completely innocent in something, but yet they would have to spend a lot of legal fees to untangle it. So again, it's not just a casual thing. It can be very expensive. In the case of sovereign nation, both, again, the buyer and the seller they were not involved. It's somebody who inserts themselves, or there are people who insert themselves fraudulently in between that honest transaction, that if it's not caught, they can end up spending a lot more money than they had. And it's expensive enough to buy and sell a property. We don't want to be adding an expense on top of that, never mind the mental stress and all the delay in business, the delay in moving that happens. So it can have a profound impact on both residences, businesses, and the people that are helping them, the lawyers, the banks, the attorneys, because that just is delaying everybody else's work.
It creates a cloud over title. So it would have to be undone because liens remain with the land. So even to go to courts to undo it.
Now, when we go back to the title insurance, they're advising more people to take advantage of that opportunity to have title insurance. But there's two different types of title insurance. Now, and again, you're the experts in real estate. I'm not. But and we saw this a lot during COVID, where changes in policies were responding to what's happening in the market. But there's also a insurance that covers once you buy the house. So you can have a house. Let's say you have a property, many of the ones that Heidi has dealt with, you had a property and somebody tried to record it in their name. Title insurance doesn't affect that once the property is sold. That's only for the actual sale and figuring out who owned the property in a clear manner before the transaction. But this insurance covers any fraudulent activity that would happen once you purchase the house. So you might have the house 20 years later, somebody, let's say the a relative died and somebody sees the obituary and then tries to record that. If you didn't have insurance on that, that could be a problem, and that would be a big expense. So there's title insurance for that as well.
We haven't once again, that's quite a recent development. Used to be, as you said, Nancy, it's only one. You buy the insurance cover up to the day you purchase. But I'm sure now
I'm sorry to interrupt, Jane, but it used to be the traditional title insurance policy was that they would defend your rights to title. So if anything came back during your ownership, the title companies, it's their obligation to defend it as long as it was public information. But now with this fraudulent conveyance, that added the nuance to it. That might not be covered under the traditional title policy.
This is what I had, that they wanted it should include the language to the effect that if somebody else claims to have rights affecting your title for forgery or impersonation.
That's a good.
Now, during the pandemic, we had a lot of people that couldn't go to work, and like businesses that they owned a business and they all of a sudden had no money coming in. that there was a whole legal issue about how much the insurance company was going to cover for loss of business operations. So this is that nuance responding to the market.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, believe it or not, we are almost out of time. We have about 2 minutes left. So anything else you'd like to cover? You guys are both kind enough
I want to
come-
say something.
Come back next week so we don't have to rush everything in. You guys are
Ken, I always have big mouth.
Yeah, and you
I know,
and you didn't say oblique this show
because I didn't get a chance
That's
because
right.
everybody have
So you have the last 2 minutes, Jane. Go ahead.
First of all, we're very fortunate to have Honorable Nancy Pinkin here today with us. As an East Brunswick resident, was super proud to have you. You not only help our town, do so much for us. You do for the county, you do for New Jersey, you do for everybody. You set up such great example for a lot of young people, in the years to follow your footsteps.
Yeah, so East Brunswick is very proud to say
We're
you're
proud.
a resident of our town.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
Every time
Yeah.
the election, I just know which box to check. I mean, a lot of time, right? I mean, we're not here to talk politics, so don't worry. We're not talking politics. Regardless your belief, your party, you should choose the right person. The person you believe will have your best interest or your community best interest at heart. That's most important thing, at least for us, right? For me and Ken. Yeah. So we always vote. We believe who's going to do the right thing, not only for ourselves and for our community, for our state. So that's the future. We're here to help our kids, right? So we're really grateful. We're really grateful for all your contribution and hard work.
And for coming on this show to share with our listener base.
You're so busy. I couldn't believe it when you agreed to come. I said, oh my God.
Yeah.
Is it because we all live in East Brunswick? Yeah. Maybe. But
that was a wonderful thing that the Middlesex County Bar sponsored. It was so enlightening. And I think if they do more of those, it would be beneficial to the attorneys, title company agents, realtors. But that was I enjoyed that seminar, that learning lunch very much.
I did too. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we are out of time. Hope everyone enjoyed the show. We'll see you guys next week for Mother's Day, and have a good rest of the weekend.
Thank you.